The story begins in the most unassuming way, setting the foundation for the dramatic shift that will soon unfold. The protagonist is wrapping up what they believe to be just another ordinary day. Maybe it's a long day at work, where hours of paperwork, meetings, and small talk with colleagues have left them mentally exhausted. Or perhaps it's after attending a friend's small gathering, where laughter and casual chatter fill the air. Either way, the evening begins with routine, a comfortable monotony that makes what's to come even more startling. As the protagonist says their goodbyes, they are filled with that familiar sense of relief of heading home. They think about small, everyday matters, what they'll eat when they get in, whether they should finally catch up on that TV series, or how nice it will feel to just take off their shoes and rest. This grounding in the ordinary is crucial, because it frames the story in a world we all recognize. Nothing strange, nothing out of place, just another drive home. The night itself is painted with a mixture of tranquility and subtle unease. The streets are quieter than usual, as if the world is slowly falling asleep. Streetlights stretch shadows across the pavement, the yellow glow flickering in places where bulbs haven't been replaced. A gentle wind carries leaves across the road, and maybe the air hints at an oncoming storm, with clouds gathering in the distance. It's the kind of atmosphere that makes one feel both calm and slightly alert, aware of how isolated the roads feel at night. The protagonist slips into their car, a space that feels familiar and safe. The sound of the engine starting is comforting, a reminder of control and routine. They adjust the rearview mirror, check their phone for messages before tossing it aside, and finally pull out onto the street. The hum of the tires against the asphalt is steady, soothing. For the first few minutes, it feels like nothing more than a typical end-of-day drive. Yet beneath this ordinariness, the narration hints that something isn't quite right. Perhaps the protagonist notices an unusual stillness, or perhaps they feel the faintest twinge of anxiety that they can't quite explain. They may brush it off as tiredness, but it's enough to plant a seed in the reader's mind. Something is about to disrupt this ordinary night. The balance between normalcy and foreboding creates quiet tension, urging the reader to keep turning the page. In this opening act, the focus is on grounding the protagonist's life, their mindset, and their world. We see them as relatable and human, someone we can easily identify with. The ordinariness is the hook, because when something unexpected occurs later, the contrast will be striking. The drive home begins with calm, silence, and routine, but the subtle imagery of empty streets, dim lights, and an approaching storm foreshadows the upheaval ahead. This part ends with the protagonist settling into the rhythm of driving, blissfully unaware that this seemingly ordinary night will soon become a turning point, one that will change their life forever. As the protagonist drives further into the night, the sense of routine begins to subtly unravel. The first few miles feel normal, the familiar route, the predictable turns, the quiet rhythm of the tires rolling over the pavement. Yet soon, something disrupts this smooth monotony. It begins quietly, almost innocuously, but quickly becomes impossible to ignore. Perhaps it starts with a detour. A stretch of the main road is blocked, construction cones lined across the asphalt, a flashing road closed sign, or even a police barricade that forces drivers to turn around. The protagonist sighs, mildly annoyed, and reroutes through an unfamiliar back road. This shift in direction alone unsettles the atmosphere. The streets look different. Darker, narrower, perhaps eerily empty. Streetlights are farther apart, shadows stretch longer, and the hum of the engine suddenly feels louder in the silence. Or perhaps the strangeness arrives in the form of a figure by the roadside. At first, it's just a vague silhouette in the headlights, someone standing alone, waving slightly, trying to get the driver's attention. The protagonist slows instinctively, heart skipping as questions rush in. Why are they out here? Are they in trouble? Should I stop? They consider ignoring it, but something about the figure, whether it's desperation in their movements or the simple moral weight of leaving someone stranded, makes stopping feel unavoidable. Another possibility lies in the sense of being followed. A car appears in the rearview mirror, its headlights glowing bright and steady. It doesn't matter how many turns the protagonist takes, it's still there, at just the right distance to be noticeable, but not overtly aggressive. Anxiety builds with each glance at the mirror. Every flash of headlights a reminder that the protagonist is not alone on this drive. Whichever form the encounter takes, the underlying theme is clear. The ordinary drive has been interrupted. Something, or someone, has inserted itself into the protagonist's path, altering the course of the night. The protagonist's first reaction is rationalization. They tell themselves they're imagining things, or that it's not a big deal. They focus on calming their nerves, trying to convince themselves that the night is still ordinary, still safe. Yet a creeping unease lingers. As the moment stretches, the protagonist is faced with a small but significant decision. Do they ignore the encounter and continue driving? Do they stop to help at the risk of inviting trouble? Do they speed up to shake off the car behind them, even if it means drawing attention? Their decision, seemingly minor, sets the trajectory of the story. The atmosphere thickens here with subtle dread. Even if nothing overtly threatening has happened yet, the reader feels it coming. The emptiness of the road, the dimness of the lights, the unpredictability of strangers, all combine to create tension. The protagonist may grip the wheel a little tighter, heart rate quickening, as they sense they've stumbled into something far from ordinary. Part 2 closes with the protagonist committing to an action, slowing down for the stranger, pulling onto the detour or deciding to confront the strange car behind them. Whatever choice they make, it will lead directly into the next pivotal moment, the arrival of an unexpected passenger, and with them, the unraveling of the night. The quiet unease of the strange encounter transforms into something far more personal when the protagonist ends up with someone inside their car. Whether this happens because they decide to help a stranded stranger on the roadside, or because the mysterious car following them forces a confrontation that results in someone climbing in, the tone of the story shifts dramatically in this section. The protagonist, once alone in the comforting privacy of their car, now has to share that space with an unexpected passenger, someone whose presence changes everything. At first, the moment is awkward. If it's a stranger they picked up, the protagonist tries to justify their choice. Maybe the person looked harmless, maybe they seemed desperate, maybe guilt or empathy drove the decision. As the stranger settles into the seat, the protagonist becomes hyper-aware of every detail, the way their clothes are rumpled, the smell of rain or sweat clinging to them, the slight tremor in their voice when they thank the driver. Small talk might follow, where they're headed, why they were stranded, or vague comments about the weather. But beneath this politeness, unease lingers. Something feels off, though the protagonist can't quite place what. If the passenger is not a stranger but someone familiar, say, a friend's sibling, a neighbor, or a vague acquaintance, the tension takes on a different shape. There's comfort in recognizing them, but also confusion about why they were in such an unusual situation. The protagonist may ask casual questions, trying to make sense of the coincidence, yet the answers may be evasive or oddly unsatisfying. The confined space of the car magnifies every subtle tension. The protagonist notices small things, how the passenger avoids eye contact, fiddles nervously with their hands, or stares out the window in silence. Perhaps they carry a bag they keep close, refusing to set it down. Perhaps their tone changes suddenly when certain questions are asked. These details begin to plant seeds of suspicion, tiny hints that the passenger's story may not be as simple as it seems. As the drive continues, conversation, or silence, begins to feel heavier. The protagonist tries to keep things casual, but unease grows with every passing minute. The once familiar hum of the car now seems amplified, pressing into the quiet gaps between words. The road feels longer, darker, and more isolated than usual. The protagonist can't shake the feeling that this person's presence isn't a coincidence at all. It's fate, or perhaps something much darker. This section thrives on the duality of safety and danger. On one hand, the protagonist is doing something seemingly good, helping someone, providing shelter from the night. On the other, the intimacy of the car makes escape difficult if things go wrong. Every small shift in tone or gesture becomes a potential red flag. By the end of this part, the passenger reveals something, whether intentionally or through a slip, that raises the stakes. It could be a strange comment, a detail in their story that doesn't add up, or even an unexpected item glimpsed in their possession. The protagonist realizes that this is no ordinary hitchhiker, friend, or lost traveler. The drive has shifted into new, dangerous territory. The chapter closes with an undeniable truth. The car is no longer just a vehicle carrying the protagonist home. It has become the setting of a mystery, with an unexpected passenger who may change the protagonist's life forever. By this stage, the drive has already shifted from routine to unsettling, but in Part 4, the story deepens into palpable tension. The once quiet road is now thick with unease, every mile traveled amplifying the sense that the protagonist is no longer in control of their journey. The unexpected passenger's presence, which at first felt manageable, now begins to raise alarm in ways that can no longer be ignored. At first, the tension reveals itself in subtle ways. The passenger's body language becomes increasingly odd. Perhaps they are restless, shifting in their seat, glancing repeatedly in the mirrors, or asking questions that feel probing. They may avoid giving clear answers about their destination, or worse, change their story slightly each time they're asked. The protagonist notices inconsistencies, and the seed of suspicion planted earlier now begins to sprout. Something about this person doesn't add up. The atmosphere in the car grows heavier. Small talk dries up and silence becomes oppressive. The protagonist finds themselves hyper-aware of every sound. The rhythmic swish of the windshield wipers, the low drone of the engine, even the faint rustle as the passenger adjusts their position. The road ahead seems endless, lit only by fleeting stretches of yellow streetlights, with shadows swallowing everything beyond. The claustrophobia of the situation becomes overwhelming, being stuck in a moving box with a stranger whose intentions are unclear. Gradually, the tension escalates through conversation. The passenger begins to ask unsettling questions about where the protagonist lives, whether anyone is waiting for them at home, or how often they drive this route. At first, these questions might seem like idle curiosity, but when layered together, they hint at something more invasive. The protagonist tries to answer carefully, choosing their words with caution, suddenly aware that revealing too much could be dangerous. Perhaps the passenger also lets something slip, an offhand remark that doesn't align with their earlier story, or a piece of knowledge about the protagonist they never should have had. That slip becomes the first undeniable crack in their facade. The protagonist feels their pulse quicken, and the steering wheel grows slick in their hands as they realize the night has taken on an edge they never anticipated. The protagonist debates what to do. Should they continue driving and hope this all resolves? Should they find an excuse to pull over, maybe at a gas station or convenience store, and end this strange ride? But even those choices feel dangerous. If the passenger senses suspicion, things could escalate quickly. The protagonist is caught in a mental tug-of-war, weighing safety against politeness, fear against reason. As the tension builds, the story teases the possibility of imminent danger without fully unleashing it. The passenger might reach into their bag for something innocuous, but the protagonist braces for the worst. A car might pass by, headlights filling the cabin for a fleeting moment, only to disappear again, plunging them back into eerie isolation. Every second feels stretched, every glance exchanged, charged with meaning. Part 4 closes on a note of unbearable suspense. The protagonist is acutely aware that they are not just giving someone a ride, they are sitting beside a mystery that feels increasingly threatening. They sense that something big is about to surface, something that will either confirm their worst fears or change the night forever. The rising tension leaves no doubt. This drive is spiraling toward a revelation. By now, the tension has built to a breaking point, and in Part 5, the story takes its most pivotal turn. The passenger's true identity, motive, or secret begins to surface. What once felt like a strange but manageable encounter transforms into a life-altering moment of revelation. It doesn't happen all at once. At first, it begins with something small, a comment, a gesture, or an object that slips into view. The protagonist might notice the corner of a photograph sticking out of the passenger's bag, or the metallic glint of something they shouldn't be carrying. Maybe the passenger accidentally addresses the protagonist by name, even though they never gave it. Whatever form it takes, it's enough to shatter the fragile balance of the ride. The protagonist's mind races, replaying every odd detail from earlier, the inconsistent stories, the probing questions, the strange nervousness. Suddenly, the pieces begin to fit together. This person is not who they claim to be. Perhaps they're running from something, or towards something. Perhaps they know far more about the protagonist than they should, suggesting this wasn't a chance encounter after all. The passenger, sensing the shift, drops their mask. Their tone changes, sharper now, more direct. They might confess something startling, an admission that they've been following the protagonist, that they've been searching for them specifically, or that they're fleeing a danger the protagonist is now inadvertently tied into. The car, once filled with strained politeness, now vibrates with the weight of truth. Depending on the story's direction, the revelation could fall into several paths. A dark secret. The passenger reveals that they are involved in something criminal or dangerous, on the run from police or from someone much worse. The protagonist realizes they are now complicit simply by giving them a ride. A personal connection. The stranger may not be a stranger at all. Perhaps they know the protagonist's family or carry information about a long-buried past event. Their appearance tonight was no accident. It was orchestrated. A hidden agenda. The passenger admits that they chose this night, this car, and this driver for a reason. Whether it's revenge, protection, or a desperate plea for help, the revelation redefines the protagonist's role in the unfolding drama. The moment is charged with fear and disbelief. The protagonist feels both frozen and exposed, trapped behind the wheel with no easy way out. They may try to mask their reaction, feigning calm while adrenaline surges through them. Every glance in the mirror, every flicker of headlights outside, feels amplified by the revelation pressing in on them. The shocking truth doesn't just reshape the situation, it reshapes the protagonist's understanding of their entire night. What began as a simple drive home is now something much larger, darker, and irreversible. They are no longer just a driver. They are a key player in someone else's secret, perhaps even their survival. Part 5 closes with the air thick with danger and clarity. The protagonist knows one thing for certain. There's no going back to the ordinary night they thought they were having. The revelation has forever altered the course of their drive, and possibly their life. If the shocking revelation cracked the night wide open, Part 6 is where everything shatters. The passenger's truth has been laid bare, and the protagonist can no longer cling to the hope that this will be just another unsettling encounter. This is the climax of the story, the moment where tension erupts into action, and the protagonist is forced to make choices that could determine not only their own safety, but also how the night will end. The air inside the car is heavy, charged with danger. Whatever the revelation was, whether the passenger admitted to running from someone carrying something illicit or having a personal connection to the protagonist, the consequences now manifest fully. Words turn into confrontation. Voices rise, the rhythm of breathing quickens, and the car that once felt like a protective shell now feels like a moving trap. The protagonist's heart pounds as they weigh their options. Should they confront the passenger directly, demanding answers with equal intensity? Should they remain calm and hope to de-escalate the situation? Or should they look for a chance to escape, spotting a lit gas station, a police cruiser, or even a busy intersection where help might be within reach? Each possibility carries risk because the passenger's volatility is now undeniable. Perhaps the passenger becomes physically aggressive, leaning closer, blocking the protagonist's view, or reaching into their bag for something concealed. Perhaps it's a weapon, or perhaps it's an object that symbolizes the depth of their story. A blood-stained item, a wad of money, a photograph that ties the protagonist into a past they'd rather forget. The passenger might even beg desperately for the protagonist to continue helping them, their pleas laced with fear of whoever might be chasing them. This combination of desperation and potential danger pushes the protagonist to their breaking point. The drive itself reflects the chaos. Rain might begin to fall, making the road slick and difficult to navigate. Headlights from passing cars flash like fleeting lifelines, but none stay long enough to provide real help. Perhaps the passenger demands the protagonist keep driving faster, taking turns down unfamiliar roads. The sense of being lost, not only physically, but emotionally, becomes overwhelming. At this stage, the protagonist's inner turmoil is just as gripping as the external danger. They wrestle with conflicting instincts, empathy and fear, survival and morality. On one hand, the passenger's story may reveal them as a victim of circumstances, someone fleeing abuse, corruption, or betrayal. On the other, their actions make them unpredictable, maybe even lethal. The protagonist realizes that no matter what, the decision they make here will alter their life forever. The breaking point arrives in a moment of pure intensity, a sudden outburst, a near crash, a physical struggle within the moving car. Time seems to slow as the protagonist must choose, fight back, take control, or surrender. It is the story's most dramatic turning point, where adrenaline and fear collide in a way that cannot be undone. Part 6 closes at the edge of resolution, but not yet safety. The protagonist has acted, whether to fight, flee, or give in, and the consequences of that choice will spill directly into the resolution. One thing is certain. The night can no longer return to normal. The drive is now a fight for survival, both physically and emotionally. After the chaos and intensity of the breaking point, Part 7 brings the story into resolution, but not without scars. This is where the immediate danger subsides, yet the weight of what has happened becomes fully realized. The protagonist, who began this night with a simple goal of getting home, now finds themselves at the tail end of an ordeal that has forever altered their sense of safety, trust, and normalcy. The resolution depends heavily on the choices made during the breaking point. If the protagonist fought back against the passenger, perhaps the confrontation ended in violence, forcing the passenger out of the car or even leaving them injured on the roadside. The relief of escaping danger is tempered with guilt, adrenaline still coursing through their veins as they wonder whether they did the right thing. If instead they chose to flee, perhaps by pulling into a crowded, well-lit place, the arrival of others, police, strangers, or even friends, marks the end of the physical danger but not the emotional fallout. And if the protagonist surrendered, perhaps they drove the passenger exactly where they demanded, only to be released with a chilling sense that they were merely a tool in someone else's desperate plan. Regardless of how the conflict resolves, the car becomes quieter now, though not peaceful. The hum of the engine is no longer comforting. It's a stark reminder of how thin the line is between ordinary life and chaos. The protagonist's hands may still tremble on the steering wheel, their chest rising and falling in sharp bursts of breath as they process what has just occurred. The passenger, whether gone or subdued, has left an indelible mark. The seat beside them feels tainted, once filled with someone who brought fear, revelation, and danger into their night. As they continue driving, or wait for help to arrive, the protagonist begins to reflect. They replay every decision, stopping in the first place, letting the passenger in, ignoring the early warning signs. Regret mingles with relief, and questions swirl relentlessly. Could I have prevented this? Should I have done more? What happens now? These reflections highlight the core of the story. The idea that even one seemingly small choice, like offering someone a ride, can spiral into life-changing consequences. The resolution also brings closure to the passenger's story. If they were revealed to be a criminal, fugitive, or manipulator, their presence leaves the protagonist shaken but wiser, aware of how dangerous blind trust can be. If they were instead someone in genuine danger, fleeing from an abuser, a pursuer, or a corrupt system, the protagonist may feel torn, haunted by the human cost of their decisions. Either way, the passenger exits the story, but the imprint they leave behind is permanent. By the time the protagonist finally approaches home or some place of safety, they are not the same person who began the journey. The quiet streets and glowing lights that once symbolized normalcy now feel surreal. Relief mixes with exhaustion as they realize they survived the night, but nothing about it will ever truly leave them. Part 7 closes with a sense of finality in the immediate danger, but the story is not yet finished. The true impact of this night, the way it will shape the protagonist's life moving forward, will unfold in the final. Part of the story shifts from the immediate chaos of the drive to the long shadow it casts over the protagonist's life. The events of that single night, which began so ordinarily, have left a permanent mark, emotional, psychological, and perhaps even physical. Where the earlier parts of the story thrived on suspense and conflict, Part 8 focuses on aftermath, reflection, and transformation. In the days or weeks following, the protagonist finds themselves struggling to return to normalcy. The simple act of driving, once routine and mindless, now triggers unease. Every late-night commute carries echoes of that night. The way the headlights carved shadows into the road, the tense silence inside the car, the revelation that stripped away the illusion of safety. They grip the wheel tighter, glancing into the rearview mirror more often than before, half expecting another stranger to emerge from the darkness. Sleep does not come easily. Nightmares replay fragments of the ordeal, the stranger's face, their words, the breaking point of confrontation. Sometimes the protagonist jolts awake in a cold sweat, unable to separate dream from memory. Even in daylight, reminders surface unexpectedly. A stranger's gaze on the street, an unfamiliar car tailing too closely, the hum of an engine that sounds too familiar. Ordinary details now carry a weight they never did before. Yet alongside the fear, there is a new clarity. The protagonist begins to see life differently, recognizing how fragile the line is between safety and danger, between trust and betrayal. They may feel both wiser and wearier, less naive but also more burdened. What was once blind faith in routine, driving home, trusting strangers, assuming the night was harmless, is gone. In its place is vigilance, perhaps even paranoia, but also a sharpened awareness of the world. Depending on how the story unfolded, the consequences may extend outward. If the passenger was tied to crime, law enforcement may reach out, pulling the protagonist into a web of investigation. If the passenger was a victim themselves, the protagonist may wrestle with guilt, wondering if they did enough to help. If violence occurred, there could be lingering legal, moral, or emotional consequences. In every case, the protagonist realizes they are forever tied to the stranger's story, a reluctant participant in something larger than themselves. Despite the weight of trauma, there is also a subtle theme of resilience. Slowly, the protagonist adapts. They may begin to share their story with others, friends, family, or even strangers, discovering that speaking it aloud lessens the burden. Or perhaps they keep it locked inside, but find strength in their survival, a quiet determination to move forward even with scars. The closing reflection ties everything together, that a single drive home, something so mundane and forgettable, became the hinge upon which their life pivoted. It wasn't just about a passenger or a revelation. It was about the realization that life can change in an instant, that ordinary nights can hold extraordinary turning points. The story ends not with absolute closure, but with lingering resonance. The protagonist has survived, but they will never be the same. The road home, once a symbol of routine comfort, will forever carry the memory of the night when everything changed.